Hello everyone, welcome back to today's Analyst for 3rd of December 2023, where we will be trying to understand the most important articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express. Now, looking at the table of contents, we find that the very first article is regarding the banning of dark patterns in India's e-commerce sector. Next, we'll be looking at a recent cyclone that is slated to strike the eastern states of India. In the next article, we will be looking regarding the re-election of India into the International Maritime Organization Council. And in the next one, we'll be looking at the recent COP28 highlights in the reference of two recent outlines that we will be trying to understand. And finally, we'll be concluding the discussion with the earthquake that recently took place at Philippines. Here we'll be trying to understand the location in news aspect. Now, as always, before starting the discussion, I want to tell you that the handout is available in the description. So do definitely check it out. Now, in this very first article, we find that the center has totally banned the use of dark patterns on the e-commerce platforms in India. And for that, it has notified some guidelines. This is very important from GS2, where we have government interventions in various sectors, in various issues pertaining to Indian governance and polity. And for this, we need to focus on the centrality of the consumer protection issues in India. Now, why this is relating to consumer protection? Let us understand this. Now see, let me show you first some screenshots of prominent websites, such as this is the Swiggy that we properly use for our food orders, right? These are some websites or say applications from where you can learn new languages, and one of them is Duolingo. And this is one very famous social media platform, Facebook. Now, we have to understand we are living in a digital age, and time and again we use our mobile phones, laptops to access the internet, from where we get many services, such as we get information regarding any crucial fact that we may want to know. We also get e-commerce platforms such as Flipkart, Amazon, from where we can buy several goods and services. We also have video services on say YouTube, on say Netflix, Amazon Prime, where people can watch videos for their entertainment and also information too, as you are watching this video right now. Now, there are various tactics used by some websites to market or sell their products. The very famous one is just advertising them in a very simple manner that you can see advertisement all over the internet. Even on YouTube, before playing one video, you generally typically see an ad playing, right? Similarly, there are some advertisements which are common throughout the internet, but there are some tactics that these websites use intentionally to manipulate your or every other consumer of the internet and influence their psychological attributes so that they can be tricked into say buying their products, say following them, or say give your personal information so that they can have your data, so that they can sell your data to any other third-party websites for their own monetary gain. Now you know data is the recent or say data is the new oil right now. So that is why consumer protection regarding privacy, regarding personal information, regarding these particular tricky advertisements are very important. And one of those patterns or one of those tricks that these websites are using are known as dark patterns. Now let me first give you some very basic examples of the thing. Now whenever, do you remember the fact that whenever you are ordering something on Swiggy, don't Swiggy give you this kind of tag that complete your meal with some other items from the menu, so that you will be tricked into adding more because you are already hungry and you want more food to just add up to your hunger. So you will be say without much thinking adding this more product to your already existing order. Then when you will be going to the order page, sometimes in some websites they will be saying that you can donate 4 rupees to Feeding India. You have the option to remove it nonetheless, but these are already ordered sometimes without even taking your consent. So these things are ordered to the or say added to the final bill, hence increasing the bill amount. Say people who are very cautious about their spending online, they will sometimes skip these messages and they will be spending more for some services they do not initially want. Then Duolingo, or many websites for that matter, they use something known as shaming. They use something known as shaming their clients or say customers by putting up a very sad emoji or say putting up a very persuasive sad message that if you are not using Duolingo, you are making Duo, or which is a bird in their logo, very sad. So some people will be feeling very ashamed and say they will be again using their services. This is to trick your psychology. And also sometimes there we will be also looking at some false alerts or say false attempts to grab your attention by some websites such as Facebook, where it will be telling you about some updates. For example, say it is telling about waiting for you 3 group updates, 1 new notification and 1 event invite. Why not totally show in the notification what those updates are? If they will be showing you, would you be opening the app to see the kind of information and notification? No, right? So it is deliberately manipulating you to click the notification and open the app, right? So it is to gain your own time and your attention into this. Let us look at some more values. Here we can see this is an Amazon subscription, or say this is a Prime membership that Amazon offers to its members. Now it is very easy to hook up to a membership on any website, but it is very difficult to get out of that. So see, if you go on to end your membership, you will be given many options, so that it will be totally confusing you. So that they will be telling you to cancel membership and end benefits. They will be also telling you to say, I want to keep my benefits, I do not want to keep my benefits, keep my membership and my benefits. It is so much confusing for some people. You will be stuck in a maze, and once you enter the subscription and you want to get out, you cannot get out very easily unless you are very aware of what the particular website is tricking you on. And when I am telling you it is very easy to sign a membership, the famous example of YouTube Premium comes to my mind. You must be at one point of your say YouTube experience have seen this particular ad. If you are going to say download any one video, right, they will be asking you to subscribe to YouTube Premium. In YouTube Premium, you can download the videos and watch whenever at your convenience. But see that they are highlighting the try it free button in blue and skip free trial in white. So it is totally demanding your attention towards the free button. So that you sign on to the trial, so that initially this will be say free for 1 month or 3 months. After that you have to pay monthly charges. Now this is a way to pull in the users and totally give you subscription, but later they will be charging you. So these are all the dark patterns that are prevalent all over the internet, and these are generally the tricks that these internet companies they use to attract users, honey trap them and keep them in their database and keep them in their revenue sources. So these are generally through the use of deceptive design techniques and user interfaces. What are user interfaces? These are the designs of the particular website. As I told, this is a particular design interface that you are choosing a blue versus white button. You are confusing the options to the consumers by having so many buttons. So this is the way of which you can be totally confused. Then it is actually the end goal of the companies is to manipulate you and deceive you to take certain actions. What can be those actions? To say subscribe them, to say give payments to them, to say give your data to them, and many other things. And this is totally unethical, because you are not having your consent given directly. Your consent is being influenced unethically, right? So this is not at all ethical. And finally, these patterns exploit cognitive biases. They pertain to your cognitive bias. That means if you are hungry and your brain is giving you signal to have some food, then these particular applications are exploiting you even more by sending you more notifications, by sending you some more additional recommendations to what to eat and what not. So you essentially may have spent 100 rupees initially for your food, but finally you end up spending 400 rupees by using these tactics. And also this is particularly to totally manipulate your behavioral tendencies on the online activity. And that is why we find that these are on the rise nowadays, particularly children, elderlies, then people who are not digitally literate. They fall into the trap, and that is why the government of India, via the Central Consumer Protection Authority, has taken concrete and totally strict steps in this direction. It has released the guidelines for preventing and regulation of dark patterns 2023 as of November 30, 2023. It applies to all platforms that are present online. Then these platforms, whether they are goods or services, or they are in the advertising business, right, or they are sellers, these guidelines will be applicable to all. And in these guidelines, the government has totally defined what is a dark pattern, and this will be the under section 2 subclause 9 of the Consumer Protection Act 2019. It is telling that the dark patterns are any practices or deceptive design pattern using user interface or user experience interaction on any platform that is designed to mislead or trick users to do something they originally did not want to do or intend to do. So this is very, very important to understand that people do not want to buy, people do not want to give their data, but they are tricked in doing so. Then it is also by subverting or impairing the consumer autonomy, because the consumers, when the companies are attacking their cognitive biases, they're tricking them, they lose their autonomy, they lose their control, they fall into the trap of some lucrative offers, they trap into the offers of say free subscriptions, but finally they do not understand that later they have to pay. So in essence they are losing their autonomy, they are losing their decision making or choice, and this is amounting to what? Misleading advertisement. Because advertisements are totally moral, there is nothing wrong with advertisement. You can advertise your products, but you cannot trick using this kind of tricks, right, the consumers, or any unfair trade practices. That is violation of consumer rights. That is the main thing you have to understand. But you do not need to worry about this long definition. You do not have to memorize this. If it comes in examination, you can subtract or say summarize this in your own terms, keeping in the essence of the particular discussion. Now in the annexure 1, initially the Consumer Protection Authority, they published the guidelines in September, in the beginning or say first or second week of the September. They were the draft guidelines, and in the draft guidelines there were 10 dark patterns such as this: false urgency, basket sneaking, confirmed shaming, forced action, subscription trap, interference, bait and switch, drip pricing, disguised ads, and nagging. So these were the 10 initial dark patterns identified by the government of India initially in their draft notification guidelines. Right now they have come up with 13. The 10 initially which were there, they are still here right now. Now they have added trick question, SaaS billing or software as a service billing, and rogue malwares. So these are the new terms which are added. Now again, you do not need to remember any definition, but yes, do mention or say do add these terms to your notes, so that if UPSC will be asking you that what is a SaaS billing or what is a subscription trap in your prelims, you can identify them with dark patterns in one of the options. So in this way only they will be asking you questions. Now, so what are the concluding thoughts, or say what is the significance of these guidelines? Now the very first is that for companies which are doing these dark patterns, there are also messages for them, because they involve in dark patterns and people are actually tricked or manipulated in, then people will not be actually happy when they receive the product too. So that is why it has been seen, according to a research, that the products or say goods or services which are sold via dark patterns, they have high amount of returns, they have high amount of complaints from the customers, and that is why they have to have more support staff or say customer care executives. They have to have a good amount of logistics, because there will be high returns, because people will be returning the products. If for example say if you are lured by a cloth, right, or say a t-shirt or a salwar kameez, and later you find that it is as not of good quality, because you are essentially tricked. So you will be returning that, right? So that is why companies are now seeing that actually the hidden cost of doing business via dark pattern is actually more, right? So they have to pay more to the UX team. UX team is a particular team which is designing the websites or applications. You have to spend more on marketing. So these are all the hidden costs that the companies were initially unaware of, and right now, since it has been totally banned, so the companies can be aware of this cost too. Then it is also promoting ethical practices, because by banning these 13 dark patterns across all e-commerce platforms, sellers and advertisers alike, it is prohibiting the unethical practices flowing into the public domain. And finally, it is obviously about empowering the customers and consumers, because we have to understand that the consumer is the most powerful entity in the market, and we have to empower them instead of, say, losing their autonomy. Then it is also about supporting digital inclusion. I told, right, the elderlies, the children, the people who are not too good with digital applications, they need to be protected, and it is a very good step in this direction. And finally, many countries, particularly those in the EU, particularly the US, they have also identified such dark patterns and totally banned them. So India is also along with the same global trend of doing so. So this was the all necessary things that was needed in this particular article. Now, in the next one, we find that a cyclone named Michaung is slated to strike the coastal states of eastern India, particularly Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. Now, it is very, very important that we study the cyclones and all the disasters which are taking place around us, particularly under GS1, where we have the salient features of world's physical geography. And particularly, even more so, cyclone topic becomes very, very important, because not only we may be asked to say why water cyclones, how they are formed, why they are becoming more and more prominent in the Arabian Sea, and what are the changing effects of the cyclones and so on. We have already discussed this in the earlier videos, but here in this particular one, I will be discussing with you how a cyclone actually is formed, the very basics of it, and also how they are named. And that is a very, very interesting aspect which I am, say, expecting that all of you will be very much enjoying the same. Okay, according to 2013 PYQ in mains, they have asked that the recent cyclone on the east coast of India was called a Philae. How are the tropical cyclones named across the world? So it becomes very, very important for us to actually know how they are actually named. Now, before that, let me walk you through the very basics of cyclone. Now see, we know that the earth receives the maximum amount of heat at the equator, right? And accordingly, we know via studying the trade wind patterns across the world that at the equator we get the low pressure. In a very generalized version, we get the low pressure here, and subsequently the high pressure zones and the low pressure zones subsequently they arrange themselves, right? So for our simplification, let us understand that we have low pressure area here and the high pressure areas at the top. And when we know that on a particular vast stretch of our oceans and seas or waters, if the waters are particularly warm, right, and the sun's solar insolation falls on the particular water, and it leads to the evaporation, and it leads to the warming of the air parcels or the air column above the surface of the ocean, so that when they are actually warmed, the warm air rises up, because warm air is lighter, and hence when the warm air rises up, it creates a low pressure area. And we know that a low pressure area is almost like a vacuum, and that is why to fill this vacuum, winds from the high pressure regions actually come to fill this gap. So that is what causes a wind. That is, we must always remember that a wind always flows from the high pressure areas to the low pressure areas. So this is the very first condition of forming a cyclone. And now when the warm column of air rises above, it not only rises above as air, but also it carries water moisture with it. And when this water moisture and air rises up, right? It gains in altitude, and we also know with altitude the temperature declines. So this parcel of air containing water moisture, they rises above and they start cooling, and hence leads to the formation of clouds. Now, when the sea surface temperatures will be higher than 27 degree, or say 26.5 degrees Celsius in some studies too, it is found that more the temperature of the ocean, more will be the rising of air columns with the moisture, and more will be the formation of clouds, and more will be the incoming winds from the high pressure regions. And we know that due to the rotation of the earth, there is a particular Coriolis force, and this force typically leads to a deflection of wind in the northern hemisphere towards the right. This is due to the motion of the earth, and the deflection of the winds from the southern hemisphere to the left. And that is why when these winds which are coming from the high pressure regions, they will be start spinning in this direction of the Coriolis force, and that is what leads to this spiraling motion of, say, cyclones. This is what leads to the spiraling motion of the cyclones. And here we can understand this is a stepwise. At first, initially it is being heated, then the wind starts coming and it starts spinning due to the Coriolis force, then air column reaches at the top, forming a very, very big cumulonimbus clouds, and essentially when these clouds become too big, they create a depression, they lead to a creation of depressions, and when this further intensifies, this leads to a cyclonic depression. So this is a very simple way of how cyclones are actually formed. Now we need to look at the global distribution of cyclones, and essentially by cyclones we mean tropical cyclones. These are actually known in the Indian Ocean as cyclones. In the, say, Atlantic Ocean, they are known as hurricanes. Towards the, say, this side of the Americas, they are also known as hurricanes. The period and month are actually given here. Then near the coast of Australia and New Zealand, they are actually known as Willy Willies, and near Japan and China, they are actually known as typhoons. Now, there are regional meteorological authorities across the world which are designated to naming these cyclones. There are a total of 6 regional authorities. There are 3 in the northern hemisphere, 3 in the southern hemisphere, which are responsible for naming the cyclones. The 3 in northern hemisphere are the North Atlantic Eastern Pacific region, where the US is having its authority of naming the cyclones. Then there is this Central Pacific Hurricane Center, which is also controlled by the US. Then we have in the Northern Indian Ocean, which is named by the India Meteorological Department. There is also one unofficial one, which is chaired by the Japan. So same can be observed in the south, where we have Mauritius, then we have Papua New Guinea, Australia, and we have Fiji and New Zealand, who are having the authority of naming the cyclones that pertain to their particular oceanic regions. So this is the way in which the cyclones are named and classified across the whole world. Okay. Now, when it comes to naming, we have to look at some very important aspects. Now see, in 2004, for the North Indian region, ocean, in 2004, the 8 countries which are surrounding the rim of Indian Ocean, right, along which India was also a part, they were asked to submit 8 names. Each country submitted 8 names, so essentially it led to the 64 names of cyclone. The last name of the cyclones was Amphan, and this list expired in 2020. Now what is this list I am talking about? Here, these 8 countries, right, they are arranged alphabetically in an alphabetical order. They have to give 8 names, and these will be arranged in 8 particular columns, so that every time a cyclone will be taking place in the North Indian Ocean, the names alphabetically according to the country in the list, they will be taken up. In the next one, I will be showing you in a more simplified manner. But as of 2020, there is a new list right now. there is a new list right now in which now there are not only 8 countries, there are 13 nations which are directly and indirectly say impacted by the cyclones taking place in the both North Indian Ocean, Bay of Bengal and the Arabian Sea that we can see here, right? The countries are Bangladesh, India, Iran, Maldives, Myanmar, Oman, Pakistan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Sri Lanka, Thailand, UAE and Yemen. So you can look at all the countries in this particular map here and you can see that they are directly and indirectly being in this particular region and they are also very prone to attacks by cyclone. And you may ask me right now why we need to name them at all. And why so many names and why so much a complicated system? Because when a cyclone strikes, the countries, they have to take immediate action and for that they have to name the cyclone for their official purposes. That is why the countries came up with, or say the entire world or geographical community, they came up with such a concept of naming the cyclones. Now there are some rules, very interesting rules for naming the cyclones, and you should also keep in mind these rules. They can be asked in prelims or in mains again. The rules are that the names that these countries will be forwarding, they cannot be politically or ideologically, right? They have to be very, very ideologically neutral in terms of religious beliefs, cultures, genders, so that it does not offend anyone. Next, it should not offend any groups around the world. It cannot be more than 8 letters or 8 words, right? Then it should not be unpleasant or cruel in nature. It should be short and easy to say. Cannot say repeat names of tropical cyclones across the North Indian Ocean, so that if one name was suggested earlier, it cannot be used again. It can be rejected by member countries if the conditions are not met. And finally, the finalized names may also be reviewed during the implementation if a member raises an objectional justification. So this is the way in which these countries are naming. And let me now show you the list, which is the present list as of now. Now see, can you see that all these countries here are arranged in alphabetical order, starting from Bangladesh, India, Iran and so on. There are these 13 nations who have in various 13 lists, they have given 13 names of their own. If we take India's case, India's 13 names are Gati, Tej, Maraso, Ag, Vyom, Jhar and so on. Now, the cyclone naming process will be starting in the alphabetical order. That means when a cyclone will be taking place, we have to start with Bangladesh, Nisarga's name. Then we will have to go with India's name, then Iran's name, Maldives' names on in this particular way. We have to first exhaust the first column or say list 1. We have to totally exhaust the first names here. Then we have to go to the second list. When all the cyclones have taken place and they have been named, then we will be going to the next list with Biparjoy. Biparjoy, Tej, Hanun, Midli and so on. And right now, the naming of our cyclone, of recent cyclone is Michaung, which is the name given by Myanmar. So we can understand that so far by now, there have been around this amount of 13 cyclones plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That means total up to now there have been 18 cyclones and total there are 13 countries. They have given 13 lists. So there will be around 169 lists name in this list, and it is expected that these lists will be in operation till around say 30 years. So till 2050, around this 2050, the names will be continued in this particular manner, that it will be starting from here, then it will be starting from here, then you have to go by here and so on. So this is how in a very interesting manner the cyclones are named. Now in the next one, we have to look at a very significant event when India has been re-elected to International Maritime Organization Council with the highest tally. And India has been elected in a 2-year tenure at the IMOC. IMOC is the Council to the International Maritime Organization, which is a specialized agency of the United Nations looking into the maritime trade and the overall regulation of the shipping industry all across the world. So it is very, very significant because typically India right now is aiming to become not only a superpower economically via say land route, it is also trying to extend its influence over the sea routes. And this particular election, or say re-election in this matter, is boosting India's aspirations for the same. This is important for GS2, where we have to look at various international institutions and their mandate and their impact on India. Now here we will be focusing on the IMO. Now, IMO is a specialized agency of the United Nations, as I already told, that is responsible for the global standard setting for shipping industry and regulating the marine trade. It will be looking into the various safety aspects, security aspects, and environmental aspects of the shipping industry. Because you have to understand that even though shipping is an centuries old tradition, even millennia old tradition, it leads to various safety issues of, say, when we deploy merchant vessels, when we deploy resource excavating vessels on the ocean and seas, we typically involve labor, cost, operations. We also send various chemicals, various raw materials on which some ships also, say, operate on the seas for resource extraction of, say, petroleum, which can lead to an environmental safety hazard. So that is why we need an overarching international maritime organization which will be looking into these matters. IMO was formed in 1948 and it became a specialized agency of the UN in 1959. And it was renamed as IMO in 1982. The membership, I already told, it is around having 174 members, and along which India is also a member. The headquarters is at London, and here the work of the IMO is actually carried on by the IMO Secretariat, member states, international governmental organizations, and also NGOs. So this is also very, very crucial information that you can note down. Then other UN organizations may also observe the proceedings of the IMO, such as the UNICEF, such as the International Labour Organization, who have direct and indirect stake in the IMO. They can also take part here. Now, let us look at two important roles. First, the environmental role that IMO is playing. Second, the safety measures that the IMO is taking. First, let us understand that IMO is providing the legal and technical framework for all ships and the various requirements and various technologies that ships must have when it wants to, or say, set to sail at sea. Now, let us look at the various platforms in which it is able to make this legal and technical framework. The very first and the very popular is the MARPOL Convention. The MARPOL Convention is having many annexes, as we can see here. Annex 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Across various annexes, we can understand why and how it is actually playing an environmental role. In the very first annex, it is preventing oil pollution. In the second annex, it is controlling the pollution in the bulk. In the third one, it is about preventing harmful substances in package form, and so on. This is a very, very important list that I want you all to make a note of, because UPSC can ask you regarding the MARPOL and what it is actually related to. So it is actually regulating the environmental damages related to the environmental, global shipping arena. Next, the IMO also designated some special areas in the ocean which are very, very ecologically and biodiverse, and they need to be protected. These areas are known as particularly sensitive sea areas, where it prohibits any sea corridor for ships, so that no ships can sail, because here we can find a high amount of biodiversity. Next, there is a mandatory ship routing system in the Great Barrier Reef, because we have to understand Great Barrier Reef is also one of these particular sensitive areas where we cannot have any ship to sail, because it can totally damage the corals that are found there. Then there is also a Globe Ballast Partnership project, which is a partnership of the GEF, Global Environmental Fund, the UNDP and the IMO, which will be looking into the reducing of the harmful aquatic organisms and pathogens in the sea water ballast. Then there will be also Global Maritime Energy Efficiency Partnership Project, which is also looking to reduce the greenhouse gas emission from the shipping industry. Finally, we have the Global Maritime Technological Corporation Network, which is a network in Asia, Africa, Caribbean, Latin, and also the Pacific, to help countries reduce GHG from the shipping industry. Now, why did I name all this? Because these are very, very important for your prelims, because since IMO is in the news, there are various other convention projects. They are also very, very important, and at one place you are getting everything. So please do refer to the handout also for better revision. Now, looking at another role of the IMO, particularly from maritime safety and security side, we have also to look at various other shipping conventions, because again I told you these are very, very important for prelims and mains both. Now, the very first is SOLAS. SOLAS is a very, very famous convention related to maritime security, because it was framed in 1914 when the infamous Titanic sinking was observed by the entire world. So it led to the formation of shipping standards for construction, equipment and operation to ensure that the passengers, the crew at the ships are safe. So it is a kind of convention that is totally standardizing everything here. Next, we have the international collision regulations, right, which is reducing the amount of numerous collisions at sea that can result from, say, spilling of oil, collision between different ships and vessels and so on. Then we have the Marpol Convention we have already seen, and these actually took place after also a very, very infamous incident known as the Torrey Canyon disaster, which is the UK's or United Kingdom worst oil accident ever. It led to the widespread amount of spilling of oil all across the, say, UK region, and that is why the Marpol Convention also came into the picture. Then we have Ballast Water Management Convention. And here we have found that many species around the world are extinct due to this ballast water which is released from the ships, and that is why this convention. Next, we also have one ISPS code which was actually framed after the 9/11 attack in the US, because it was felt that the terrorists, they can target some strategic vessels across the sea. That is why it was actually a part of the SOLAS convention. This ISPS code was standardized to minimize the threat level by increasing the amount of sensors, tracking, navigation across all of the ships in the world to reduce the amount of terrorist or, say, piracy attacks. Next, we have ACUA convention, which is a separation of unlawful acts against the safety of marine navigation to protect merchant ships and passengers. Now, this convention is totally dedicated to merchant ships, which are privately operated ships, and also the passenger ships. Next, we have various piracy and anti-robbery conventions and countermeasures by the IMO, so that piracy, which is also very, very prevalent in Somalia and some East African nations, they can be countered for the safety and security of ships. We also have search and rescue operations at sea by the IMO for those distressed passengers who are lost at sea. This can be in the events of, say, aftermath of shipwrecks, aircraft accidents and so on. So the IMO also looks after this. So we can understand this is a very, very important institution when it comes to the international maritime scene. Now, in the next one, we will be looking at two highlights. As of now, we are getting from the COP. Now, remind that these are not the two final ones, because the COP is yet to conclude over this week, and it is slated that we are also getting many initiatives, many schemes from the COP, which is very, very important from your prelims environmental aspect. So let us not ignore any part of the CO2, especially the terms, the small details in the newspaper that can come in the prelims and can ask you what are these conventions or, say, schemes about. Here, the first one is known as the Global Renewables Energy Efficiency Pledge, which India and China is not a part of as of now. Then we are also getting another news of, say, Altera. Altera is a fund which was announced by the UAE to mobilize private sector climate investment in the climate change financing in the entire world. This is related to around $30 billion. Now let us look at the very first one, which is the Global Renewables and Energy Efficiency Pledge. This idea is not new. It was first floated in April by the European Commission, President Ursula von der Leyen, and later it was also proposed at the G20, but it was not adopted. Essentially, it seeks what? It seeks to triple the amount of installed renewable energy capacity. This can be solar, this can be wind, this can be any other mode that the members will be agreeing to, which are renewable energies. So whatever the countries right now have installed in their particular countries, they are seeking to triple it. And also they are seeking to double the efficiency they are getting out of this particular energy. Efficiency means that you are upgrading the technology, you are investing more in, say, repairing the installed capacity of renewables so that you can get more output energy from renewables and, say, reduce the dependence on the fossil fuels. So the target of tripling is around 11,000 gigawatts by 2030 at the worldwide level, and the energy efficiency is around 4% increase by 2030. Now India is not very happy with this, because India has already said that we have close to 170 gigawatt of installed capacity of renewables in India right now. Along with that, by 2030 we are aiming to generate electricity from non-fossil fuels by 2030, and we can understand, if right now we are telling that we will be tripling, this will be overshooting this particular aim that we have right now. As a developing country, we cannot afford that right now. So that is why we are not happy with the particular pledge. And there is also a global disagreement on whether the large dams are under the renewable energy or not, because it is a form of hydropower, and hydropower is from water, which can be classified as a renewable energy. But several countries all around the world, they say that hydropower is not renewable because it leads to a lot of indirect emissions out of, say, deforestation to set up these large dams and so on. So that is why large dams can or cannot be classified. And also there is another issue of this particular pledge having no legal, say, recognition by the COP, or say it is not also present in the final document of the COP. So why to go after it right now? So let everything settle down, then maybe India can be having a positive perspective towards it. In the next announcement, we find that by 2030, the emerging markets and the developing countries all over the world, they will be in requirement of around $2.4 trillion of climate compensation across the world. Why? Because mostly the emerging countries of, say, Latin America, Africa, the Asian regions, even India, and the small island developing nations of, say, Pacific Ocean, they require huge finances to offset the losses due to climate change. And that is at the tune of $2.4 trillion, and it is being said that often the governments may not be able to do much, and that is why the private companies, the private institutions, they can also step in. So this particular initiative Altera, which is looking at mobilizing the private say funds for climate financing. It is having 4 verticals here: energy transition from, say, fossil fuels to solar panels, wind energy, which is renewable energy. It is also looking at industrial decarbonization of, say, coal-based thermal power plants, which leads to the amount of carbon dioxide emissions, and, say, transform it to a solar plant, for example. Then it is also leading to new and more climate technologies, so that the advanced nations can be providing these to the poorer nations. And finally, it is also about promoting a sustainable living. This can be promoted by agroforestry, or, say, sustainable agriculture methods. This will be a private fund. That means here the governments will not be here. The private institutions, private companies can be contributing to the fund. It is established by Leonet, which is an independent global investment manager mobilized by the Abu Dhabi global market. The 4 verticals I have told, and here the initial tranche will also be coming to the India in the tune of setting up 6 gigawatt of new clean energy capacity in India, and also wind and solar projects by 2025 to the tune of 1200 megawatt. So this is the amount of mobilization that we can see. And further, this fund will be divided into two parts. First is the acceleration part that will be given $25 billion. Second is the transformation part, which will be given $5 billion, taking the total contribution to around $30 billion. In the final one, we will be talking about the earthquake that struck recently as of yesterday night at Mindanao at Philippines. It is estimated to be around 7.6 magnitude earthquake which took place in this particular region. It is very, very important from geographical aspect that we have to study. Now here let us understand the geographical location of Mindanao. It is located in the particular island of Philippines. This is the Philippines country, we can understand, and the earthquake took place in this particular region. Now the mapping becomes very, very important, particularly from the surrounding sea, surrounding countries aspect. As we can see, it is located in the Celebes Sea. The Palawan island is located beside, and we can understand the various countries surrounding it is the Indonesia to the south, and also we have the Banda Sea, which is also a very prominent sea in Indonesian circles. Then we have the surrounding nations to the very far west of Vietnam, Malaysia, Singapore, and even Hong Kong at the Chinese coast. So that is why we have to keep a track of the surrounding seas, surrounding countries, and also sometimes UPC can also ask you to arrange the capital of several Southeast Asian countries from east to west, or say west to east. So please have a proper look at the particular map that is being shown here. Now earthquakes in this particular region are very, very common because this particular region is home to the ring of fire, which is the most tectonically active region in the entire world, because we can see we have the Pacific plate, Eurasian plate, India-Australia plate, North American and the South American plates. We have in this particular region, which is a very, very volatile region, and that is why in the areas marked red, we can understand we find a large amount of volcanoes, and often earthquakes are very, very common here every day in fact. So this is another term that we wanted to know. Now we have to look at tsunami, because after this earthquake took place, a tsunami alert was also declared. Now how or what leads to a particular tsunami is very important to know. Typically tsunamis are large waves of ocean water that inundates the coastal areas, typically destroying the lives and livelihood of the particular areas. They are generally caused by underwater disturbances such as earthquake, volcanic eruption, landslides, and they can turn up to around 500 miles per hour to heights of around 100 feet. Right? How it happens? Firstly, the earthquake must happen below the ocean floor, and it happens at that particular area of epicenter where a large amount of water is suddenly displaced. And when this water is displaced, the water is actually drawn in from the coastal areas. And where will this water go? This will go on to pile up near the epicenter. And when this water which is piled up near the epicenter, they will also be right now prone to flow towards the coastal areas, hence leading to this amount of huge waves. And this typically leads to tsunami. In 2004, the infamous tsunami that struck Andaman Nicobar Islands is also well in memory, recent memory. So this was all for today. I thank you very much for being a very patient audience. All the best for your preparation till we meet again. Thank you.